Okay, so Django REST framework. It's something that we've kind of alluded to in the past, but haven't really gotten into. And the reason for that is Django REST framework is a very powerful tool that does everything that we all have already been doing. It's useful because it allows you to save a lot of time on tasks that are otherwise get repetitive. So if you want to make a Django REST API very quickly, Django REST framework is a great tool for that. And again, the reason we taught you without it is because we want to make sure that you know how to set up an API from scratch without having to rely on Django REST framework, which may not always be available. So I'm going to be demonstrating this by modifying the Wine project API to use Django REST framework. This tutorial is also available on the lesson plan for yesterday. There's a link to it. It doesn't involve that many changes, so this shouldn't take super long. So let me share my screen. All right, so here I have got my Wine project. I've checked out to a new branch. I'm gonna make sure I activate my virtual environment. First thing I'm going to do is and this is exactly what I was showing you earlier this morning. The only thing has changed, I've commented out a few things, and you'll see in a bit. So first I'm going to pip install Django REST framework, which confusingly enough, they don't have their pip install matched other instances of how you reference Django REST framework, which really bothers me, but that's a small detail. Next, in my settings, under installed apps, I'm going to make sure to add REST_framework. So those are that's the main thing, is that lets you get the box into your app, and so that allows you to open it up and use what's inside. So Django REST framework has built-in functions that are all around dealing with JSON responses. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check out my URLs for my the app, not the project. And so I've got the Django URLs import path. I'm going to say from REST framework.routers. I'm going to import something called default router. And from .views, I'm going to be importing something called wine view set, which we'll get to in a little bit. So the router allows us to essentially set up all of the baseline routes that we did manually here. So I'd say router is equal to a default router. And we would say router.register. We'd say R, a raw string, that's just going to be empty. We're going to have our wine view set, which again, we're going to write in a bit, and base name, which is going to equal wine. And then we're going to set up our URL patterns to equal router.urls. I misspelled register. So that will do essentially what we did here, following the same pattern. So that's how you set up your URLs using REST framework. Next, I'm going to add a serializer. That's also a built-in REST framework thing. So you know what serializers do. This is going to do the same thing, just going to do it a little bit quicker. So honestly, if you don't want to use the rest of REST framework, I do recommend using the serializers because it's so much easier. So I'm going to say from REST framework, I'm going to import serializers. From .models, I'm going to import wine. And then I'm going to make a class, wine serializer, which inherits from serializers.model serializer. So it looks a lot like it essentially is almost the same as our forms that we did earlier. So So we have a subclass meta, where model equals wine, and fields will equal name, price, varietal, and description. All right, and then the last thing is we go to views. So I've commented out all the views here. And I'm going to say from .models, I'm going to import wine. From .serializers, I'm going to import my wine serializer. And from REST framework, I'm going to import view sets. Excuse me. And then in order to set up my views, I just have to say class wine view set inherits from view sets dot model view set. I'm going to say query set equals wine dot objects dot all, and serializer class equals wine serializer. And that's really all there is to it. So you pip install Django REST framework, add it to your installed apps. Under URLs, you get a default router. You register it using our wine view set that we put in views with the base name of wine. And then we set our patterns to router.urls, which sets this up. Our wine view set here sets up all of these things, our new wine, edit wine, etc. And we tell it to make use of our wine serializer, which takes in a wine query set and spits out a JSON object. So now if I run, one sec, I'm not sure if I'm in the right folder. If I run my server, you should see it in action, and hopefully this all works. Uh-oh. All right, so we have from .model import wine. Where's that? In views.py, that should be from .models. All right, so now if I go to localhost 8000, all right, so it says right here are your patterns. So I go to wines. And Django REST framework also provides this very handy GUI for us to use. So /wines, I can make GET requests this way. If I want to make a new wine, I can do that. So yellowtail Zin 9.99, it's a Zinfandel. This is the cheap stuff. I hit post. Now my wine list has that Zinfandel. If I want to see one thing, I can go hit wine/1. I've got options here, so I can make a GET request. I can delete it. And I can still make fetch requests to this endpoint the same way I have been doing as well. So I can actually even see you can do it through raw data like this and everything like that. So what questions do you have about REST framework?
How do you do that with a many-to-many relationship, or if you have more than one model?
Good question. I believe it should honestly work mostly the same. Depending on your URLs, you may need to get a little creative there, but you can just add more serializers, more views. Doing nested Crud may be a little more difficult, but Django REST framework has a very comprehensive documentation. I'll put that. I will link this tutorial and the docs in Slack right now, because I do not know how to do nested CRUD with Django REST Framework yet. I would have to look that up. But this is the basic way. This is the basic way. I imagine, again, that the serializers would work the same. The view set would work fine for individual models. It's just a matter of getting it nested, maybe take some extra steps.
When would we not use this?
So the difficult part about REST framework is that it's, let me see, it's essentially like getting a pre-made package of stuff, and all that stuff is super useful, but it's not necessarily easy to customize. So if at any point you wanted some non-standard REST behavior, you know, an endpoint that doesn't follow the standard REST rules, then it stops being as useful. You're using it under the assumption that you are going to follow this exact pattern of, you know, index new, get new, detail, etc. And if you're not following that pattern, then it's not as helpful.
Thank you.
No problem. What other questions are there?
I kind of had the same kind of question too, of like having more than one model and like a many-to-many.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I tried it yesterday, last night, and I just couldn't get it to work, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so if I take a look here, got the Django Docs, let's see if they have anything right here that may help us out with that. So if we did something like view sets, so that's for a user. Maybe if I Google this might be easier. So I do like nested CRUD Django REST framework. Just looking at this Medium article here. So this is one and say like, you know, books, author slash author slash authors slash author ID slash books, stuff like that. So they have an example here. So they have authors and books and editions. So an author has, so a book has an author right there, and a book has multiple conditions as well. So they have the serializers here. And notice that you can, for a book, you can serialize the book's author or an edition's book, even though that's a foreign key. So that's handled automatically when it comes to serialization. As opposed to view sets. So it looks like they have something called nested view set mixin. So they have a serializer author view set, then they have a book view set, and that inherits from nested view set mixin and model view set. So this is something called Drf Extensions, which adds a mixin to your view sets that allows those params to be handled correctly. And it looks like your router can register multiple models. And then they created something called a nested default router here. So this tutorial looks like it'd be very helpful for that in particular. So I'll also Slack this out.
Yeah, I have a question. So Auto like made that form for you, but we like specified the fields. Is that because we specified those fields?
Yes, you need to specify the fields.
So what if you don't specify a field, but that field is like, it can't be null, like it's required on your table?
Then I imagine it would break somehow. I just don't know exactly what the error you would get is. But yeah, if you don't give it a way of processing a required field, it wouldn't be able to save it. What other questions do you have? Jeez. Okay. In that case, I will let you all go. I hope this was helpful.
I have a question unrelated after the recording.
Okay, one sec.